Have you ever had a perfect moment shattered by one sentence? My son had just blown out his birthday candles when it happened. Everyone was cheering, clapping, laughing. 6 little candles melted into frosting as Lucas grinned at me, wide-eyed, happy, safe. I remember thinking, this is it. This is everything I fought for. Just one peaceful day, one perfect memory. And then a hand grabbed my arm. Hard. I turned so fast, I nearly dropped the knife still in my hand. A woman in scrubs stood there, eyes sharp, breath uneven, like she had been running or hiding. "I'm sorry," she whispered urgently, her grip tightening, "but you need to check the hospital records right now." I blinked at her, confused, annoyed, honestly, a little angry. "Excuse me? Who are you?" But she didn't answer that, not directly. Instead, her eyes drifted past me, locking onto Lucas. And something about the way she looked at him made my stomach drop. Not curiosity, not kindness, recognition. "My name is Nina," she said quickly. "I work at the hospital where your son was born, and I shouldn't be here, but I didn't know how else to reach you. Now tell me, what would you do in that moment?" Because I did what anyone would do. I laughed it off. I told her she had the wrong person, that today wasn't the day for whatever this was. I even tried to pull my arm free, but she didn't let go. Instead, she leaned closer, lowered her voice, and said something I still hear in my head over and over again. "Your son isn't who you think he is." Everything around me kept moving. Music playing, kids shouting, someone calling for more cake. But inside me, everything stopped. I felt it, that tiny crack of doubt, the kind that doesn't make sense but refuses to go away. Because here's the thing. There was something strange about the day Lucas was born. Something I had buried, ignored, trusted someone else to fix. And suddenly, standing there in my backyard, surrounded by balloons and laughter, it didn't feel so resolved anymore. I finally pulled my arm free, turned back toward my son. He was laughing, smiling, completely unaware. And behind me, Nina whispered one last thing. "If you don't check now, you might lose him again." Lose him again? I had never lost my son. So why did that feel like a memory I wasn't allowed to remember? Before we continue with this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Lose him again? That sentence wouldn't leave my head. I turned slowly, my heart already beating faster than it should. "What do you mean, again?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "I've never lost my son." The woman, Nina, hesitated, just for a second, like she was deciding how much she could say and how much she shouldn't. "Can we talk somewhere private?" she asked. Now, here's the thing. Every instinct in me was screaming to ignore her, to go back to the party, to my son, to normal. But something deeper, something quieter, told me to listen. So I led her around the side of the house, away from the noise. The music faded, the laughter blurred into the background, and suddenly it felt like we were standing in a completely different world. "I work in records," Nina said quickly, "pediatric archives. I was reviewing old files from 6 years ago, and I found something that didn't match." "Didn't match what?" I asked. "Your son's identification code, the one assigned at birth." I frowned. "That doesn't make any sense." "It didn't to me either," she admitted, so I kept digging. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded document. Her hands were slightly shaking. "Look at this." I didn't want to. I really didn't, but I took it anyway. It was a printed record, faded, old, hospital header at the top. And there it was. Name, Lucas Carter. My breath caught. But then my eyes moved to the photo attached to the file. A newborn baby, tiny, wrapped in a blanket, labeled as my son, except that wasn't Lucas, or at least it didn't look like the baby I remembered. Photos can be misleading, I said quickly, my voice defensive. Babies all look similar. I thought that too, she said, until I checked the ID band records. She pointed to a string of numbers. This code, she tapped it, doesn't match the one in your discharge file. I froze. What are you saying? Nina looked me dead in the eyes. I'm saying there may have been a mix-up the night your son was born. A mix-up? No, that wasn't possible. I had an emergency C-section. Everything was chaotic, but they handled it. My mom was there. They gave me my baby. Are you sure? Nina asked softly. That question hit harder than anything she'd said, because suddenly, I wasn't sure. Fragments of that night flickered in my mind. Bright lights, rushed voices, nurses moving quickly, someone calling for more cake. But inside me, everything stopped. I felt it, that tiny crack of doubt, the kind that doesn't make sense but refuses to go away. Because here's the thing, there was something strange about the day Lucas was born. Something I had buried, ignored, trusted someone else to fix. And suddenly, standing there in my backyard, surrounded by balloons and laughter, it didn't feel so resolved anymore. I finally pulled my arm free, turned back toward my son. He was laughing, smiling, completely unaware. And behind me, Nina whispered one last thing. If you don't check now, you might lose him again. Lose him again? I had never lost my son, so why did that feel like a memory I wasn't allowed to remember? Another family looking for my son? I actually laughed when I said it, not because it was funny, but because it was impossible, right? That doesn't make any sense, I added quickly, shaking my head. If something like that happened, it would have been discovered years ago. Nina didn't argue. She just watched me, the way someone watches a glass about to shatter. It was questioned, she said carefully, but it never got resolved. Behind us, the party kept going, kids screaming with laughter, music playing, someone calling Lucas's name. And suddenly, all of it felt distant, like I was underwater. What do you mean it wasn't resolved? I asked. Nina exhaled slowly. The Reynolds family, parents of the other baby, they requested a DNA test when their son was about 2 years old. My stomach dropped. And, I pushed, there were inconsistencies, she said. Enough to raise concern, but not enough for the hospital to officially admit fault. Inconsistencies? I snapped. That's not an answer. It means the case was buried, she said bluntly. Buried. Just like that. 6 years of my life, reduced to a possible error someone decided wasn't worth fixing. No, I said, backing away slightly. No, that's not happening. You're mistaken. I wish I was, Nina replied softly. She reached into her bag again and pulled out something smaller this time, a clear plastic pouch. Inside it was a hospital ID band. Do you still have his? She asked. For a second, I didn't answer, because yes, I did. Every mother keeps those things, the tiny bracelet, the first proof that your child existed outside of you. I'll be right back, I said, already moving. I walked quickly, too quickly, into the house, past guests, past laughter, straight to my bedroom. My hands were shaking as I opened the drawer. There it was, Lucas's baby box. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside, the bracelet, the hospital tag, the memories I thought were solid. I grabbed them and rushed back outside. Nina was waiting, silent, watching. I handed her the bracelet.
She didn't speak as she compared it to the one in her pouch. Just a few seconds. That's all it took. Then she looked up at me and shook her head. They don't match. I felt like the ground tilted. No, that's wrong. Check again. I already did, she said gently. Everything in me wanted to scream, to deny it, to run back to my son and pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't, because now I knew something was wrong. Okay, I said slowly, forcing myself to breathe. So what happens now? Nina hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I didn't want to hear. We need a DNA test, immediately. And if it confirms what you think? Her eyes softened. Then this becomes legal. Legal, as in courts, custody, decisions made by strangers. My chest tightened. What about the other family? I asked. Nina looked away for a moment, then back at me. They contacted the hospital again last week. My heart skipped. What? Her voice dropped. They're not just asking questions anymore. A pause. They're preparing to fight. I turned instinctively toward Lucas. He was sitting on the grass, laughing as he opened another gift. Happy. Safe. Mine. And suddenly, I wasn't sure how long that would still be true. By the time the birthday candles had melted into the frosting, my world had already begun to split in two. One version where Lucas was mine, completely mine, and one where he wasn't. And for the first time, I wasn't sure which one I was living in. I agreed to the DNA test immediately. Nina had arranged for a private lab, fast-track results. I remember watching Lucas chase Bubbles across the lawn, his laughter ringing in my ears, and wondering, would he still be here if the results came back the way Nina feared? The party wound down, balloons sagged, leftover cake sat untouched. Guests said their goodbyes, oblivious to the storm that had landed on our backyard. Lucas hugged me tightly, murmuring, "Mom, are you mad at me?" I had to swallow the lump in my throat and force a smile. How could I explain to a 6-year-old that the foundation of his world might crumble before bedtime? That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed memories of the day he was born, the bright, harsh lights, the flurry of nurses, the emergency C-section, my own disorientation, my mother's hands holding me down while I tried to see my baby. Snippets of conversation I'd blocked out. "We'll sort it out," a nurse saying as I drifted back under sedation. What had they meant? And most importantly, had they actually done what they said? The next morning, my phone buzzed. "Nina. Results are Ray," the message read. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. One simple sentence, and everything I thought I knew about my life could change. I wanted to run away, pretend this wasn't happening, but I couldn't. I had to know. I had to see the truth. I sat at the kitchen table, Lucas still sleeping upstairs. My fingers hovered over the email icon, every muscle in my body tensed. Could I handle the truth? Could I survive it? The air felt thick, charged with the weight of what was about to be revealed. One click, and the years of memories, love, and trust would be tested against a simple biological fact. My mind spun. What if Lucas wasn't my biological son? Would I still love him the same? Could I fight to keep him? Could anyone? The Reynolds family, the hospital, the law, all looming like storm clouds over my tiny, fragile world. I felt the heavy pressure of every possibility, losing him, fighting for him, failing him, or realizing that love can sometimes outweigh blood. And then I took a deep breath. I clicked. The results sat on the screen, staring back at me, promising either devastation or relief. Everything I believed about my son, the boy laughing in the backyard, the one I had held through every scraped knee, every feverish night, was about to be proven true or destroyed. The screen glowed, my breath caught, and there it was, the DNA results, the words I had dreaded and longed for all at once. Lucas was not my biological son. My heart sunk, my stomach twisted, but even as panic and disbelief rose, I felt a strange calm too, a clarity that this truth, as brutal as it was, couldn't erase 6 years of love. The hospital records, once hidden in dusty archives, told the full story. The night Lucas was born had been chaotic. 2 babies had been switched during a surge in deliveries. The staff panicked, feared lawsuits, and quietly closed the case after partial DNA testing showed inconsistencies, but not enough for the hospital to officially admit fault. The Reynolds family, the parents of the other baby, had tried to pursue the truth years ago, but the hospital stalled them. Now, 6 years later, Nina had reopened the files, and I was finally staring at what everyone had buried. I cried, not from loss, but from relief, from love, from the realization that Lucas had been mine, not by blood, but by everything that truly mattered. The hugs, the laughter, the scraped knees I had kissed, the midnight tears I had shared with him, all of that was real, all of it belonged to me. The consequences, however, were unavoidable. The Reynolds family were notified. Legal consultations began immediately. The hospital faced scrutiny for negligence, possible lawsuits, and public exposure. I was terrified of what the courts might decide, of strangers judging the bond that had grown over 6 years. But even the legal risk couldn't diminish what I already knew. Lucas was my son in every meaningful way. When the Reynolds family finally met Lucas, it was emotional, quiet, and respectful. They saw the bond between us, the laughter, the care, the love built over 6 years. They understood that he belonged with me. The hospital paid compensation, publicly admitted their mistake, and made promises to prevent such errors in the future. Justice, in its own messy way, had arrived. Months later, we celebrated a quieter birthday. No grand parties, just cake, candles, and hugs. Lucas laughed as he always did, blissfully unaware of the storm we had weathered. I watched him, my chest full, my heart steady. That terrifying, gut-wrenching journey had ended not with a loss, but with the affirmation of what I already knew. Love doesn't depend on biology, it depends on presence, care, and unwavering commitment. I held him tight and whispered, "I'm never letting go." And for the first time in days, I believed it completely.